Man's best friend, a worrying trend, wherein that hunting cry, fueled by a culture of Disney and kawaii, becomes ever more a whimper, how cute. What brute would treat their dog unlike a newborn, not feed it from the same teat by which our own feet became petite? And boxed in apartment 117, on a plane of freshly fitted hardwood tiles, plasticine and plastic smiles, the toy dog yearns for grassy heaven, to sprint and let loose hunting cries, a glint of daylight over civilized.
Wow.
Yeah. I was trying to channel my slam poetry a little bit.
It was very slam poetry. It started out about a bit Alicia-esque.
Yeah, I was also trying to
scheme.
channel your rhyming.
Yeah.
Your obsessive rhyming.
So, welcome back to Solacene, everyone. This week, we're going to be starting off by talking about the domestic animal, the pet, and also the plant pet of today, houseplants.
Sure.
And before we start, we're going to talk about our zine, which accompanies this semester and talks about a walk through the wilderness depicted through artistic interpretations of how Aaron and I perceive nature.
Yeah, varying mediums for each different landscape.
Mm-hmm.
And it has a somewhat light-hearted tone, I would say. Still, dramatic as is the Solacene, but also maybe more comedic than the previous scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Still, hopefully, enlivening and enlightening, but also just an easy read.
Yes,
Not just an easy read, but an easy read.
Mm-hmm.
So you can find that zine, you can buy it through the link in the description. All the proceeds go to eco-justice, which is a cool thing about ecological justice.
Exactly.
And also, if you like the podcast, you can watch us perform it every week on YouTube. YouTube Solacene, the full videos are there. That being said, pets in the Solacene, and those, as I called them last week, lazy green pets.
Lazy green pets. I was trying to summon up that phrasing, but I couldn't remember it. I think we should start with houseplants because they're such a trend. I'd say 20 years ago, the trend was, oh, it's our baby. But it was like a dog. A couple that was like new. They would get a pet and kind of treat it like a baby. Now, we've taken it a step further, and your pothos plant is your baby, and it even propagates and has its own babies, so you have grandbabies. So
hashtag plant father.
Yes.
Did you see me ever using that?
No.
No.
You don't really hashtag much.
That's true.
Or post.
Yeah, or plant.
Yes. But houseplants have been around since the dawn of agriculture, houses. Yes, because they would have began as, well, we're going to have some things growing near the window. It'll just be on the inside to help with the climate. And also just for decorating. It's a very easy way to bring color into a space.
To spruce up your living space?
Oh, exactly.
First of many.
Because you'd build your house. I mean, we build our house today. All the walls are white. And you could create a pigment out of plants or out of today chemicals. But it's much easier to just bring the plants. Get it from the source. Get the color from the source. So they've always been a source of decoration, but also have a history of being a little bit more practical. So you'd have your herb garden. Maybe you'd have a small pepper tree. We have one growing behind you on the floor that has little spicy peppers. So it'd be a little bit more useful.
Yeah.
Whereas now I feel like...
Let me just interrupt because you say it's growing behind me on the floor. I would use the
dying.
word more decaying
Yes.
or dying. I won't embarrass you by lifting it up to the camera, but it's not your finest horticultural moment,
yes.
for sure.
Our apartment's very cold. It doesn't get any light.
Well, that's what I was thinking for the Solacene. More evergreens inside.
Yes, and very bright apartments and homes. Whereas right now, the average apartment in this city has probably one window, similar to us.
Yeah.
So it's not exactly conducive to living things, humans included in that, but living plants as well. But the plant trend really kicked off 2012, 2014 with Instagram and so on, because it's very aesthetically pleasing. Someone posts a picture of their New York apartment and there's just vines and trees and it just looks so cool and tactile. And then with the pandemic, when people were living at home and had a lot more time to tend to things, the plant revolution picked up a little bit more because it was kind of like, well, what do I do with my time? I can cook, I can clean, but we were having so much more time in our hands that plants were a very easy thing to exert that nurturing tendency of humans. And there's also quite a plant community, as I was alluding to, which, as we've talked about before in the podcast, we really miss community as a society.
Mm-hmm.
So having such an easy in to a community through plants is very appealing to people.
It's another way by which people can identify themselves.
Mm-hmm.
#plant father or
Yes.
whatever. I don't like plant mother.
Plant mom's definitely a thing.
Well, plant mom, yeah. Like it's a way that you can talk about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a plant mom, and so all these other plant moms, we are like, without even trying, kind of like friends.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's kind of a good thing. I don't know. Let's talk about houseplants in the Solacene, though. Is there any difference to houseplants today? We already said there'd be more sunlight.
More sunlight.
I assume people have plants, as we said, they've had them always indoors for the same reasons. They are lively, bright. They have a cleansing aura or placebo, even if it's not, necessarily the case.
Mm-hmm.
They can be colorful. And also, I think, even in the Solacene, like less so than today, but most of our buildings will be straight lines and flat walls. And something that's really nice about plants is that they are not geometric, whereas almost everything else we live in is like laser cut, our homes. So it's nice when things just kind of sprawl, and plants don't really have many straight lines. And they even often have some verticality, like maybe there'll be a hanging vine, or they'll just be taller than the average piece of furniture that you have, I think, which is a nice use of space, getting into Solacene interior design a little bit. But
yeah. But the reason we're talking about it in the nature series is because it's literally the only part of our homes that is natural, in that we are bringing nature indoors. And in the Solacene, I think houseplants will be perhaps even more commonplace, but less of a collector's item, more of just as I was saying, you have an herb garden and you have these decorative plants, but they'd be cared for a lot more. Because plants are compostable, I feel like we treat them, staring at the dying plant here, it's like, if it dies, it dies. It's not like it's plastic. It will just decompose in the compost. But I think in the Solacene, we'll care for our plants a bit more and perhaps just have more knowledge of how to care for them. Because I feel like there's a bit of a learning curve. And also, the climate in apartments, we act like it's just an indoor plant. It'll survive in there. But the climate inside apartments is very different. Sometimes the air you're in a city, so there's pollution, and then it will impact these plants. And most indoor plants in North America, are tropical because indoors is always warm, whereas outside here, 6 months of the year, they couldn't survive.
Yeah.
So I think it'd be a little bit more native to the area that you're living in.
I think so too. If nothing else, then because in the Solacene, we'll be hopefully relying less on air conditioning and like electric heating.
Yeah.
So things are a bit less completely steady. Like I don't think we should be shivering through like -20 nights in the winter and the opposite in the summer. But there's a bit more of a gradual change. Like you can maybe notice the seasons a little bit inside rather than just being one samey, artificial, laboratory-like condition.
Yeah. I received at the end of the growing season for the community garden, they gave me a piece of a fig tree. And they said it'll probably go dormant if your apartment's even slightly colder than outdoors. And it has in fact gone dormant. So it's like, if your apartment even fluctuates 1 to 3 degrees, your plants will also fluctuate, and a cactus isn't going to survive in a 20-degree Celsius room the way that it would in a 24-degree Celsius room. And so I think the plants will be a bit more seasonal or local. And
I want a hedge. I want an indoor evergreen hedge. What do you think about that? Possibly it's because I foresee my future home looking like an Animal Crossing character's home, where it's like it's furniture, but it doesn't really make sense as furniture. So it's literally like a topiary or just a pathway, like a hallway that's just lined with hedges. What do you think about that?
Interesting.
I like the idea of evergreen things inside, because like you said, it's almost always tropical, and that's because our conditions usually quite warm inside the office or inside the home. But I think it's nice when there are like ferns and stuff like that. Things are a little bit more leafy and needly.
I see.
I know those two are opposites, but
a little more
messy.
Sure. I think the issue with those is the roots are much deeper, whereas with tropical plants they have shallow roots.
You can have hedges indoors. You can have boxwoods indoors, yeah.
Cool.
It's a big pot, but it can be done.
It's not exactly going to fit our apartment here. Maybe a future home.
I'm going to slip in the organism of the week just because I think it's a good time to do so.
Okay.
So I'll show the image. You can name it and describe for the audience.
It's a bonsai tree, I'm assuming. So a bonsai tree, or whatever this wiggly...
It is a bonsai. Yeah. I know it's not drawn very well. It kind of looks like a face. I didn't mean to do that.
Yeah. It's like a Rorschach painting.
Yes.
But it has a very wiggly, bumpy trunk with a shallow, leafy
foliage canopy
at the top. And in a shallow pot, decorative pot.
So it's kind of colored jack-o'-lantern-esque. Yeah, bonsai. I, like many, was first introduced to this in the Karate Kid films. The bonsai is not a plant, so it's a little bit of a stretch for the organism of the week. As I frequently commit, bonsai is more of a practice. It's more of an art form. So it's kind of like you bonsai plants. Some types of plants which are frequently bonsaied: junipers, ficus, Japanese maples, jade, dwarf jade. In the Karate Kid, it is a Juniperus procumbens. Obviously.
Yes.
Have you ever wanted to bonsai? I feel like you'd be good at it. You'd enjoy it.
I have wanted to, but I've never lived in an environment conducive to their survival.
Yeah.
I mean, you had it wasn't a jade plant, but you had a plant kind of similar in this type of species category, and they're very finicky, which is kind of the practice, and you have to really care for them. They're kind of like orchids, that it's like, if you water it the wrong way, it's done for.
So the bonsai obviously is a traditionally Japanese practice. It comes from the broader Chinese art of penjing, excuse the pronunciation, which basically means making whole landscapes in miniature. Bonsai is more about making a single tree in miniature, which is kind of a cute idea. Kind of like Animal Crossing, a little bit like we were talking about. It's over 2,000 years old. It's based on Zen Buddhism. And what I find kind of interesting, obviously in the houseplants discussion, there's kind of a contrast between this, what I would kind of maybe in an overgeneral way describe as like a very Eastern practice, and what we're describing about the hashtag plant mums and the succulents, which is maybe a more Western practice.
Yeah.
I think it's best summed up in the admittedly shallow Wikipedia list of bonsai aesthetics. So it says the key aesthetic elements are miniaturization, obviously, proportion among elements, obviously, so just not making it look like ridiculous, making it still look like a tree. And then these last three, asymmetry, which I feel like we kind of aim for the opposite almost. Think about also like a very seasonal houseplant, the Christmas tree. I feel like in my family always, we would try and shape it and angle it and sometimes prune it and pick one out that is as symmetrical as possible. Like that was the aim. No trace of the artist. So like it wants to look as natural as possible without any of the artist's hand visible. And also poignancy, which basically means that it should kind of remind you of, or in some way symbolize, wabi-sabi. What would you say? Like the profundity of imperfection, asymmetry, and impermanence.
Yeah, whereas today in our houses, I mean, I used to have like a bajillion plants, so I can talk about this from a lot of personal experience. It was just like quantity over quality.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, I saw this marked down for $2. I'm going to get it and add it to my collection, and it's just going to be...
Hashtag plant mum.
Yeah, a plant mum. And then someone comes over, wow, you have so many plants, you must have a green thumb. But it's like, you just bought them all.
That's a good point.
And they're going to die, probably.
I really was kind of shocked dipping into just a little bit of the rabbit hole of how intense or how much of a science it is to bonsai these. Because I thought that they were all like dwarf variants of plants. But for the most part, they're not. It's just the way that they're pruned, including the roots. And what did it say? Careful cutting and stress techniques used to make them small, and obviously the pot kind of limits their growth already.
Yeah.
Which is something else that I found interesting, and why I drew the pot is because I feel like that's a big part of it, the way they're grown and displayed. Almost like the frame of a painting.
Yeah.
Whereas now, or maybe even in Solacene, it's just like typically doesn't matter what it grows in. Grow it in a boot, grow it in a mason jar. But there's a certain times there can be like a niceness to putting a lot of effort into what is actually growing in.
Mm-hmm.
Not as important as the plant, obviously, but important still.
I see. So in the Solacene, there'll be a bit more bonsai, a bit less #plant mom.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
It's just about like, it seems like they have a real bond with it. It's kind of interesting. Some fun facts. Actually, one fun fact. The smallest bonsais can fit on your fingertip. They're in like very, very tiny pots.
Oh my
it's not really the
goodness.
kind of thing I like because it's like cottagecore. Look, it's a cute tiny pot with a tiny plant in it, but I feel like you would like it.
Yeah,
Look up the pictures because they look like edits or something. They don't look real.
Yeah,
They're
I'll
very,
definitely
very
look that
small.
up.
Yeah. Probably pruned with like a magnifying glass or a microscope.
Definitely. Wow. Interesting choice. I thought you were going to choose the humble seal for the organism of the week because our next portion is about pets. And last night we watched 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and there's a pet seal in that.
Yes.
I feel like the ethics in that film, when it comes to how they were treating the animals, is probably very, very far removed from anything I would condone.
Right.
But it was funny.
But we
There's a
can't
seal.
mention the seal without mentioning the funniest part of the film, which is when one of the characters, lovingly, not in an abusive way, but the same way you pet a dog, he just slaps the seal a couple of times and it makes the wettest sound on camera. And I just kind of went, slaps it.
Yeah.
And it was a funny moment. So people, if you want to watch the, I think, 1954 Disney 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, recommend it. It's a good movie.
It is a really good movie.
So pets.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lightning round to begin with that I thought you could I'll just say them and you like say what comes to your mind about them in the Solacene.
Okay, in the Solacene.
Parrots.
Yes.
A little bit more than that would be nice.
Parrots. Okay, parrots in the Solacene, I don't think they're going to be any more common.
Okay.
I think they're going to remain highly niche.
Mostly on pirate shoulders.
Yeah. But
Sure.
I don't think they're going to be extinct. There's not going to be no parrots in the Solacene.
Ants.
More ants in the Solacene.
Why is that?
I feel like, I'm going to give my kid a cat. Well, as I'll get to later, very big environmental impact and also might get abused, if we're being honest. When you give a kid a cat, they always pull at them.
Oh, sure.
They're not very nice.
You don't think they would squish the ants?
The thing with the ants is that they are...
You don't care about their life.
No, they're going to be in one of those little
ant farm
terrariums.
things. Yeah.
So the kids aren't going to be able to abuse them. There's
one of those like
food in.
2D things where you can see them making the tunnels.
Yeah.
It's like an educational thing.
Yeah.
It's like I think I talked about before on the podcast. Once for Christmas, I got like a Smithsonian set that had 6 different sciencey kits involved. Like this will be one of those.
Yeah.
Less a pet, more a project.
I think there'd be more ants, more sea monkeys, those types of things.
Okay, snake.
Snakes. I think snakes are cool. I wouldn't have one.
Too demonic?
They're a bit, I just feel like they're going to bite you. Even if they don't bite you, I just feel like they're going to.
Cat.
There'll be cats, but I think there'll be some slight changes in standards for owning cats.
Bat.
No bats. Bats scare me.
Goldfish.
No goldfish.
Why not?
I feel like the small bowl is not good for them.
Horse.
Yes.
Monkey.
No monkeys.
Why not?
Because I think, again, the animals that aren't domesticated like cats and dogs and horses, I feel like they shouldn't be kept as pets.
Okay, rabbit.
Yes, rabbits.
Tortoise. That's the last one.
Yes, because turtles are the most sustainable pet.
Turtles and tortoises are 2 different things, though.
Yes, I always get them confused.
I know you do. That's why I kind of threw it as a curveball.
Probably no tortoise because they live to be hundreds of years old.
Yeah, I had this stat actually. The oldest one, his name is Jonathan. Do you know about him?
I don't know.
Has his own Wikipedia page. He's a Seychelles giant tortoise, oldest known living land animal, hatched circa 1832.
Isn't that crazy?
That is bizarre.
That's wild.
They usually have an 80 to 150 year lifespan, but he's obviously exceeding that.
Yeah. There was one in Halifax at the museum there who just lived to be 100 or something. I can't remember his name though. But yeah,
Wonder if he's on Wikipedia.
Probably is.
Whereas turtles, they live much shorter.
Yes. But I think there'll be more turtles. There will be more amphibians and more...
Like lizards?
Yeah, I guess. I feel like I have a very strange... I don't think it's necessarily universalizable, my ethics on animals.
Well, that's why I wanted to kind of preface this conversation with that even though currently you and I are the Solacene, we are the tyrannical, rulers.
But also the citizens.
And also the citizens. But the Solacene isn't us, let's put it like that. So it's like we have opinions, sometimes somewhat idiosyncratic, and we should try and separate those from the Solacene.
Yeah.
Like if it doesn't have any impact on really well-being of anybody or like a society's running, then it's just an opinion and it's not canonized in the Solacene. Because I know you went on your dog rant a few weeks ago. I know you have like thoughts on pets, but they're not always like thoughts that you think should extend to the whole society, right? They're just personal opinions sometimes. Yeah.
And I was thinking about this a lot this morning, strangely enough, that you bring this up, the preface of it's like some things just are completely fine on the individual level, but the reason that I often will go off on tangents is I always picture things being taken to kind of the extreme of like everyone's doing this, every dog is being treated like this, or every whatever, and I'm like, I feel like that's probably not good. Just like I don't think we should be tyrannical about people being vegan or about people not owning pets, but it's just like, doesn't mean I don't think people should. Anyway, yeah. It's like there's somewhere in between the individual and the larger society, and like there's lots that falls in between there. And when I was looking into the ethics of pet ownership and to kind of inform what I thought about the Solacene, it was a lot of statements from PETA, which is the organization for pets ethics, and their formal statement is that pets should not be bred for
pethood,
yeah. But it's like obviously there's billions of dogs and cats who are just like, they're domesticated, so if you just release them in the wild, that would be unethical too. So it's like a lot of these PETA people, they have pets, rescues, but they also advocate against breeding. And I'm like, I feel like I fall somewhere in between there.
So they essentially want to bring a gradual end to pethood.
Breeding of pets.
To breeding of pets, okay.
But I think pets will always exist, mainly because people will have farms and people will perhaps just, the pets will just kind of change a little bit. I don't think having such, I mean, I adore cats and dogs. Like I'm a big cat and dog person, so it's like hard for me to say this, but when I was thinking about it, it's like I don't think I'd ever buy one that was bred. I would just only ever rescue an animal.
Yeah.
So I think that's always been my belief, and I think that will extend to the Solacene. And I feel like most people have that belief.
Well, it's just like when we're talking about zoos.
Yeah.
That actually most zoos now don't do the bred for captivity thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So, because like most people will be like, yeah, it's probably not right. It's kind of the same with pets.
Yeah, because there's this kind of, I mean, the way that they were describing in these articles I'm reading is just so extreme of like the power imbalance of like, they can't even pee without your permission. But it's like, it's kind of true. It's kind of twisted when you think about it. But it's like...
Alicia gets radicalized by PETA.
I know. But I also think having pets, like we have kind of chosen for ourselves not to have a pet while living in a city, because I think you should be able to just like release it to go play for an hour or two, or to just be like, yeah, we're going to go to this big field, you run around, do your thing.
Yeah, I basically made the points. So pets are fine. Like I essentially was like, pets are fine. Like I'm not a big fan of indoor pets.
Yeah.
But I think that is, as I said, more of an idiosyncratic opinion. Like there's nothing wrong with having indoor pets, really.
Yeah.
I do think that they shouldn't be too Disneyfied, like I said in the poem, and that they shouldn't be like having birthday cakes every year, that kind of thing. Like that kind of like over coddling of them and treating them like newborns, I do think is a little bit wrong. But I think for the most part, pets are fine as long as they are properly trained, obviously, have ample access to exercise, that kind of thing, which a lot of them living in cities don't. I won't say all of them, because like some people, sometimes they do. And thirdly, that they're not bred, well, I guess you could just say not bred, but especially not bred to be like the unhealthy breeds. You know, those ones like I was reading about, there's a certain type of dog breed that's been bred so wrinkly that it kind of has like skin diseases and stuff. Very common. And obviously there's the breathing disorders, those kind of ones.
Yeah. And the thing with people who are advocating against these types of breeding, you would then be like, the people who own these dogs, like, well, what, you think you should kill my dog? And it's like, no. It's like people who are saying these things are for the rights of the animals and for their well-being. It's like, we don't think we should go out and like kill a bunch of dogs so that there's not a bunch of them being killed in shelters, or that they're just living miserable lives and we're encouraging it. And one more thing about pets that I was thinking is that we shouldn't feed them human food because there's people who don't have food. So it's just like, you should be giving them food. They need to eat. But I saw a stat that if there was a nation made up of cats and dogs, it'd be the 5th highest consumer of meat in the world. So it's like China, the United States, Russia are like above it. But it's just like, they shouldn't be eating human food.
I think there's probably just too many. There's just too many pets.
Yeah.
That's probably it.
I mean, it said, I have it written down. In 2020 alone, there were 5.7 million pets purchased in the UK.
Yeah.
Which is like this big.
Sure.
So.
I mean, it has a lot of people, but yeah, you're right.
But it's still kind of crazy. And I don't know why all the stats I was reading were about the UK. I guess that was where the research was done. But it said every year there's the size of Great Britain times 2 is how much agricultural land is devoted towards pet food. And it's like, I feel like that's not right when there's people starving.
I made a mini list of pros for pets, things that are like, these are actually really good. Kind of trying to convince myself a little bit because, yeah, I feel like I'm probably in like the bottom half of people in terms of their opinion on pets.
It's strange because we're both big animal people, but it's, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's just that I've maybe had a few bad experiences with pets. But one is that they're real, like houseplants. They bring a sense of life to the home. They're non-geometric for the most part. My dog was very flat and square, but most of them are kind of rounded. The other one is that they're good companions for children. They kind of introduce them to the natural, like, death. I think a lot of kids probably remember the first time their dog died or something like that. And also, humans and dogs, this is like specific to dogs, kind of evolved alongside each other. And there's a lot of different theories about how humans kind of evolved, not from dogs, but like there was an influence of the way that dogs socialize, or wolves at the time, to how humans did. I'm not sure how much stock there is. Like, there's different levels that the theories kind of put stock into it, but it, to some regard, like the man's best friend thing is legitimate. So I think, and they remind us a little bit of like that we're all like from the wild. You know what I mean? Like, we were talking about them having birthday cakes. I think in the Solacene they'll be a little bit slightly less domestic. Like, they will have a bit more activity to them. But even the most domestic dog, when you see them sleeping, it's like, and they start, like, their tail starts going all crazy, and they start like twitching. It's like, what are they dreaming about? Yeah. Life back thousands of years ago, back in the forest or something, back in the woods, the hunt, howling at the moon. Like, I want a dog that will howl at the moon. Let me put it like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think pets are great for humans' mental health and just, keeping us joyful. Yeah. Because it's like you could be having the worst day ever, but then you see a cute dog and you're going to just...
But I like that sense of companionship. I think it's a nice thing, and it is like historically present. It is an evolutionary thing. I made a little list of some literary characters who are famous for their pets.
Okay.
Harry Potter.
Yes.
So I've always been concerned about this. I don't know if it's a plot hole or an inconsistency, because in the books it says on like Harry's Hogwarts letter, every episode obviously has to devolve into like the minutiae of Harry Potter canon. It says students may bring an owl, a cat, or a toad.
What's this rat doing?
Yeah, what's the rat doing there? So I think she just forgot about that, or maybe it was like, well, there's a rat. It's kind of like a cat.
Yeah.
Or maybe they sensed that it wasn't actually a rat.
Maybe.
Spoilers for people who don't know about Prisoner of Azkaban. But Hedwig, that's a very loyal creature. I think having a bird would be nice. Yeah. I want an eagle. Something like that.
Yes.
Nausicaa from the manga and from the Ghibli movie. She has her little fox squirrel thing. It kind of runs up her shoulders. I want something that's going to live like on my shoulder or something like that.
I placed a heating bag on your shoulder last night. And my thought was, I feel like this could be replaced by a small creature.
Yes. Yeah. If you just put googly eyes on that, it'd probably be fine. Did you ever have a pet rock, by the way?
I didn't.
I sold them once. Yeah, I made some and sold them at school.
Entrepreneur.
Yeah. That was my one profitable company thus far.
Yeah.
And the third one, Tintin, or Tintin.
Tintin, Snowy.
Snowy, yeah.
Yeah. I love Snowy because he's very spirited and has quite the attitude.
Yeah, if you ever watch the Tintin movies, or as you do read the books, Snowy is pretty much the only competent one. Like, just constantly bailing Tintin out of genuinely life-threatening situations.
Yeah, there was one where there was a stick of dynamite about to blow up the ship that everyone was on. And Snowy found it and peed on it to put out the wick. And
Wow.
then when they find it, Captain Haddock's like, ew, what's that? Then Tintin just says, he did his best. As if it was like, it's like he just saved your life. Yeah, he did his best. He's a dog. Yeah, Snowy. I love Snowy. And I love Tintin. But that's...
So I think we can probably sneak in the second question of the day, which is a rather small one, which was about, well, it was small for me anyway, like what I have for it, kind of renaming the reduce, reuse, recycle mantra for the Solacene.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, my answer was, let's not do that, because I think people don't respond that well to slogans. Like, I feel like if reduce, reuse, recycle came out today, people would be like, don't tell me what to do. And to an extent, they'd have a point. It's like, people don't like kind of being talked down to like that. I'm not sure where reduce, reuse, recycle came from. It might have been a grassroots thing from a more earnest time.
I think it's from a more earnest time.
Yeah, from the 70s or whatever. But basically, I think Solacene has the beautiful, sustainable, tactile thing. Mm-hmm. And that the point of that is that it's rather comprehensive. Like, in terms of, what do I do with this waste? Or should I buy this? Just abide by these 3 words. Mm-hmm. Kind of like that.
Yeah, certainly.
But what did you...
I was thinking a bit about just the embodiment. Similar to you, it's not going to be like plastered all over the recycling bins or anything. But I merged, there's the 7 R's, which have been developed somewhere in Canada, and then the pyramid of like consumption. So I kind of merged the 2 of those to make a new pyramid of thought processes. This is a bit more applicable to today. So and it's going to be classified by red, yellow, green. So it'll be like a stoplight kind of thing.
Did you come up with that stoplight thing?
Yes.
Okay.
So the red, so this
Even though there's going to be no stink chariots in the Solacene, so where are people going to get this archaic iconography from?
It's going to be just kind of a blast from the past.
Okay. Well, I guess the buses will still have it.
Yeah. There might be stoplights for bikes. So the red, before you even buy it or before you even like do anything, it's don't buy, certify, or DIY. So that's like the red area. So you have to think of these 3 things. So like in the Solacene, I think there'll be a lot more certifications. I mean, not even certifications, just policies. Like, we should try and make policies and certifications so that nothing you can even buy would be non-circular or non-recyclable, but that's part of it. Don't buy it in the first place, just like use what you have, or DIY. So like, do I actually need this carrot peeler, or could I just use a knife, sort of thing.
So for that certification thing, you're thinking about like a TV license like they have in England?
TV license?
Yeah, like everyone has to own a TV license before they have a TV.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But that makes sense. Something like that. But they're in the Solacene, there'd just be a bit more, so that companies can't undercut, because there'll always be someone who wants to undercut and use the plastic instead of using the sustainable, slower method. But in the Solacene, that just won't be possible. So that's kind of what the certify means. The yellow is care, share, repair. So take care of what you have once you've acquired it. Share it with people. So it's like, oh, I need a dress for this party. Instead of going out and buying it, you can maybe borrow one from someone else. And then repair, of course. Oh, I'm going to just throw this out and buy a new one. Just fix it if you can. And in the Solacene, we'll have the skills and the things will not be built. So you have to bring it into a place to have it fixed. You'll be able to fix it yourself. I heard about this new phone that is 100% repairable, which is kind of cool. So you can like order parts from it, and then it's just easy to fix. And I would someday like to look a bit more into that.
Modular?
If I ever need a new phone, I feel like I'd look into that.
The way you mentioned that made it sound like you were starting a joke or something.
Yeah.
You're like, so I heard about this new phone that they say it's 100% repairable. What about my iPhone?
Yeah.
Or something like that. I don't know.
No, it wasn't a joke. It was just a thought. And then the green light of, okay, you have to get rid of it, as the reason I chose green instead of going the other way is because green is still, I like the idea of green being a word for sustainable things, and that is compost, rehost, or post. Needs a little bit of explanation. So I think things that are compostable are like, there's always going to be compostable things, and I like when there's certain biodegradable and compostable like packaging and stuff for things, like it's made of cornstarch, but it has to actually be
good,
compostable, not just like, oh, it will biodegrade, because anything will biodegrade if you leave it long enough, but it has to actually be thought out and compostable. and rehost. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this instead of just throwing it out or even sending it back to the owner. Maybe you can just give it to someone else who knows how to repair it or who would need it. And then post is in the Solacene, not everything, almost everything will be circular. So it's like you would then send it back to the owner if you can't compost it or if you can't rehost it or repair.
To the maker.
Yeah, and then
mail it back to Patagonia.
Yeah, and then
but you're
they
still
will
the owner.
redo it. Exactly.
Let me try and recap all 9.
Okay.
Red light before you buy. Certify, DIY, do not buy.
Yeah.
Yellow light while you're having it, while you're owning the thing, I mean. Care, share, repair. Green light to at the end of life. Post, rehost, compost.
Yeah, it is catchy enough that
pretty good.
You caught on to it. But yeah, I just thought it was kind of this was a fun activity for me of thinking of my own
I could tell.
Life. Yeah.
Sounded like a limerick.
Yeah. And the final question this week is about the T in the sustainable, beautiful tactile, the tactile. And Aaron wanted to talk about textures in nature.
Yeah.
This man loves to touch things.
Yeah, I think I was inspired a little bit by this funny interview question David Lynch, the director, faced once, and they just said, "What are your favorite textures?" And he just, off the top of his head, listed, like, he sounded slightly affronted at the question, like, how could you ask me to limit it to just a few?
Yeah.
But secondly, he just had so many off the cuff that he was ready, and they were all, or some of them were rather obscure. Like, he was like, teeth. So I was kind of interested in that because we've talked a lot about the beauty of nature, obviously, and the sustainability, but maybe not so much about the tactility. And the way I envision the Solacene, like the podcast, when it's at its best, is making people like really feel like they are there, living in that time. So I have five favorite textures. How many do you have?
I put 10, so
I guess you say 2, I say 1.
Okay. Number 1, the first thing I thought of, and this is why I asked you if I could include smells. The rest of them aren't really smell-based.
The kind of conversations we have. The way you made that sound. And this is why I submitted that formal request asking if I could include a smell.
That's basically our relationship. The first one is tree resin or amber. And the reason I love the feeling of that is you never know how it gets on you.
Yeah.
You're just kind of like walking through the woods, then you smell it, and then you look, and it's just all over your hands somehow. And I love the texture of that because it just feels so naturey and so... It almost makes you feel like you could do anything. So you're like, well, if I was in nature, I could use the tree resin as glue. Or like, I don't know.
Climb a tree with it.
Yeah, it just makes you feel...
It's so sticky.
So cool, and I like the smell of it.
And also impossible to wash off.
It won't come off. Like, there's probably still some on me. Tree resin. Number 2...
Just say it.
I can't. I just read it and then was like, what was I thinking? Biting snow.
When was the last time you did that?
Probably a long time ago.
Yeah.
But I was thinking of my favorite textures and I was like, a feeling when you like make a snowball and bite it, it's so much different than anything else. And I really like them.
Do you ever walk around when it's snowing with your tongue out? I did that, I think, last week.
Yeah, I don't do that too much.
It was dark though, so no one could see me.
I learned about the fact that snow may be white, but it's still very polluted, especially in cities.
Yeah.
But so I don't bite snow anymore, but I still like that fresh, crisp crunch is what I wrote. Those are my top 2.
Actually, I have 6. I forgot about 1. I'm going to read them not in the order that I wrote them, but from bottom to top of the body in terms of feeling them. So the first one obviously is feet. Bare feet obviously is my personal crusade for the Solacene.
Yeah.
And I wrote them all in... I think I've been just trying to get back into creative writing a little bit more, so I wrote them all in little teasers like that. Okay. Little prose excerpts, and largely in second person because that's just the tense I think is best for the Solacene. So it says, "You traipse from the sand, as warm and soft as if it was poured here grain by grain to ease your bare feet, to the dried out knives of the aquatic plant kingdom. What a pleasant pain this is. How fine to pay the salty toll." And this one's about those dried out things that crunch on the beach, dried out seaweed or whatever.
Yeah.
That hurts a lot when you walk on it.
It's very painful.
Yeah.
And
what
you
is
like
it
that?
though? It's just algae or seaweed?
It's seaweed.
Dries out in the sun?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Those little crispy ones. Yeah. I feel like it's mainly just in Nova Scotian beaches because of the geography. I've never seen it on other beaches for the most part. But yeah.
It's the first thing that came to mind. It's the feel of summer to me.
Fair play.
caressing my bare feet, sometimes drawing blood. No, never
Okay.
doing that.
Foot, on the topic of feet, I like mud.
Yeah.
When you squelch it between your toes
Oh.
and your hands, you just like squeeze it like this.
Oh,
If you're watching on YouTube.
She's squeezing her hands like there's
this.
mud in them.
And then when you are in the water at the beach, and then the sand is so spicy hot, or the stones are so hot, that as soon as you step on them, you can feel your feet dry. And then they're kind of like stuck to the sand or like stuck to the stones. It feels like you kind of merge with them.
What about that thing when you're on the beach and you put your feet in just where the water's coming, and so the water gradually comes in and like envelopes, the sand envelopes your feet in that
like
muddy
suction
suction noise, and then you have to pull them up with a big...
Yeah.
Anyway.
Good stuff. ASMR episode.
Yeah. Oh, that would be disgusting. My next one is for the lower legs, the calf, shin, maybe the bottom of the knee. And it's when a dog brushes against it.
Yeah.
It's on theme for the pet episode. So it says, our poor untouched shins, calves, and knees. Only briefly they know loyal warmth beyond the polyester pant. As a panting pet walks by, the bristlier the better. Pass by again, young Fido, and don't forget to swish that tail. Because I like when dogs kind of swish
like
the tail
the final...
like it's a fan, like they're fanning you, like your royalty or something. Egyptian royalty.
Yeah.
You like it too when dogs brush by.
I like when dogs brush up against you, for sure. I encountered the biggest, most just beefy dog ever the other day, and it was so loving, but it just was probably like 3 times the size of me. But it was wonderful, and it was like brushing up against me, but it came up to basically my chest. So
do you agree with the bristlier the better?
No, I like soft dogs.
Okay, strange.
So that's where we
that's where we differ.
Yes. My next thing is cracking the puddle ice. Do you know what I mean? When there's like puddles or potholes, and there's that thin layer of ice. Like, it's not full of water, but it's like the water is kind of evaporated, but there's still a thin layer, and you get to be the one who cracks it.
Oh, and there's no water underneath?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's such a nice feeling.
Bang, bang,
and I always
bang.
felt...
I used to be like just going up and down my driveway on those mornings.
Exactly, because you felt like, oh yes, I'm the first one to it. My siblings didn't get to it. No other school kids got to it.
Powerful.
It's mine.
Just shattering it.
Yeah, always on the way to the bus.
The downward thrust.
You don't really see those other than on your way to the school bus. The next one is when you're like camping, or it's just summer, and it's like it doesn't make sense, but the dew on the grass is so cold it gives you brain freeze. I really like that feeling.
When you're camping and...
Or you're just home and you go out into the grass barefoot for some reason.
Barefoot, but how is it giving you brain freeze unless you're laying with your head on it?
It gives you brain freeze. Sometimes in the morning when there's that dew, or that when there's like a first frost and you go out.
Oh, yeah.
It just gives you like brain freeze because it doesn't make sense that it's so cold. I think it's just you're so hot from the night, then you go out and yeah, it gives you brain freeze. But I really like that feeling.
Sure.
Wakes you up.
My next one is, it's more of a tragic story because it's a texture that you can only really look at. As soon as you try and reach out and touch it, it crumbles. And it's those old leaves that are so aged that they just look like the finest engravings on them. You know, when you can see every single vein, but then when you try and touch it, like they're basically transparent.
Yeah.
But then when you try and touch it, it just crumbles in your hand. It's quite metaphorical, really. So it says, wretchedly delicate leaf, bringing forth in your soft-spun weave my clumsy essence, dissolving in grip, I'm unpracticed to loosen. You are less a texture than a temporary viola for the fairies.
Wow.
Because I imagine like a tiny fairy playing it like an instrument with the small strings on it.
I see. Beautiful.
Yep.
Birch bark.
Yeah, I've got peeling it.
Peeling it. Then
Just
feeling that
destroying
smooth
those trees, the inside of it.
feeling underneath. Yeah. And I also said the feeling of feeding an animal, and it kind of like touches you, but it doesn't really touch you.
You mean with the wet tongue?
A little bit.
Wet but also dry?
It was like we were feeding squirrels once, and it's like they don't really touch you.
Oh, yeah.
But it's like the sensation of like the food leaving your hand, or if their tiny beak or their tiny tongue, yeah, touches you.
Do you remember what you gave it?
I gave it a pumpkin seed that we had roasted ourselves. Yeah. It was a very artisanal gift to that squirrel. But I really like feeding tiny animals because it makes you feel like you're a Disney princess.
Yeah, and a giant also. Also with the birch bark is when it kind of curls up. Like when it's off the piece of wood, I mean. When it just spirals like a scroll.
Yes.
And you open it and you can read the ancient map inscribed. My next one, I suppose, is for the hand. And it is the inside of the almond, which obviously is a storied texture in the history of our relationship.
Yeah.
one of the first things that we bonded over, really.
I was once worried you were cheating on me with an almond, if I'm being honest.
How much we like the inside
The way
feel.
you described it, yeah.
Well, just wait. So it says... So I wrote, to eat this whole like one of lesser taste, or even several at once. What a frightful thought. You, second person, you, a man as much of feeling as of hunger, must know for a moment what your enviable molars ravage. Bite, snap, and trace that firm opal center with a lustful fingertip. You don't have to use lustful. We could switch out for something else, but I just mean that there's such a... It's sensual, really.
So smooth.
So smooth. So pure white. And I was thinking about that wild almond that I had. It wasn't wild, but when I stole from that one guy's tree.
Well, the goats were eating them.
Yeah.
You kind of took one from the goats, I suppose.
I did. I just took it off the ground.
Yeah. Yeah, the wild almond. Or one that you picked off
I think
the
we're
tree.
sounding slightly psychotic on this episode, probably.
I feel like also if you're watching the YouTube, we're just like, yes. Like we're out of slam poetry.
When you touch the first frost barefoot and you get a brain freeze. You know that?
We're definitely probably more sensitive than the average.
When the algae draws blood from your feet.
Yeah, that's such a good feeling. Okay, speaking of the inside of something, inside of a seashell.
Oh, it's similar.
Similar feeling.
Smoothness.
Very smooth.
There's zero friction to it.
Yeah, I love
I
that.
just want to lick it.
And finally, a warm downpour. I don't like cold ones,
not
but I
this.
like when you're just out and then the heavens just like there's like a clap and it just,
I
and then
don't like
there's an
that.
instant flood
No.
and you're warm and wet.
Let me guess, the smell of rain. Sounding like a high school literary kid at this point.
I'm sorry. That's all my 10.
Dancing in the rain.
Yes.
Okay, I have two more. Next one is for the chest, but really it's the whole body, and it is soil, especially warm soil. When I used to work at a garden center, I would often just submerge myself to the elbows or to the shoulders in soil because I loved it, especially when it's warm. I just, like, I wanted to eat it, but nobody else ever, whenever I'd say that to them, nobody ever agreed. But I'm telling you, if you know the smell of it and you know just the feel of it, I'm not talking about muddy soil. I'm talking about when it's kind of dried out. So I guess it's not the most naturey, but anyway. So I wrote, perhaps it's the fertility. More probably the opposite. That knowing this will cradle me in death, I long to be submerged in it now. Sweet soil, for you I'd be a root. Fall on me in food-like clumps. Get lost in the contours of my sleeves and stain my fingernails forever.
I feel like you just
Yeah, I took this straight from a romance.
you just became a different person when you were reading that as well. Your voice dropped an octave. Sweet soil. I can't.
Hopefully this doesn't get us, I don't know. I don't even know what happens to podcasts. Reported or something. Taken down.
Yeah. Okay.
And then the last one is just the most recent because yesterday we were out walking, or the day before, and it was just so cold, and I didn't have anything on my face. And you were like, "Wear my scarf," and I was like, "No," because I feel like there's a certain masculine pride about facing the cold wind unsheltered. So I wrote, "Step into Typhon's brutal forge unhelmeted. Let it make of your softness, pathetic purple ears, a real human face. Kiln. Kiln. Because I feel like that's what the wind does. It's like we're soft until we go out in the wind, and then it just sets you in whatever shape you're in at that particular time, like a potato head.
Certainly. So those were your 6 second-person excerpts from your romance novel that you were...
Yep.
Now
writing.
Yeah, now writing. It's going to start with these 6, the first 6 chapters. I think that would sell for a lot, especially if you publish the audiobook.
Yeah.
The
Also,
way you're reading it.
next week we should talk about evolution. We should talk about, I'm not sure how, but I just really like the idea of fossils and dinosaurs and old creatures, extinct things, and maybe how it's taught in the Solacene or just the relevance of it.
I think it could be like the archaeology episode.
Yeah,
talking about dinosaurs, but also talking about evolution and perhaps even artifacts. Because I feel like when you're a kid, you're like, wow, I found a shark's tooth, and it's just a rock.
Sure.
But kind of that magic.
Okay. Bye, everyone. Merry Christmas.